Hey guys, tonight we walk through shadows, not the kind cast by moonlight on your bedroom wall, but the kind that cling to you after long weeks and short sleeps. You know the ones. You felt them. You trudge home, phone at 3%, socks damp for no good reason, the air outside still sticky from the day's heat. Life feels like an underwhelming sequel, same cast, worse writing. And yet, somewhere inside you, something glows. Faint, yes, but stubborn. It's not caffeine. It's not ambition. It's not even hope, not the hashtag version, anyway. It's presence, a kind of warmth in your chest that doesn't quite explain itself. And if you've made space, if you've welcomed him in, then that glow is Jesus. And it won't go out just because you're tired. You probably won't survive this life without scars. No one does. But his presence means those scars aren't senseless. They'll have stories. They'll shine. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always read them. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into this night not as someone perfect, but as someone held. You look around figuratively and literally, and everything's the same: unpaid bills, 3 unread texts from someone you're avoiding, the growing suspicion your houseplants are just politely waiting to die. And yet, something's shifted. See, when Jesus is present in you, you stop seeing things only for what they are. You start sensing what they mean. That leaky faucet? Maybe a nudge to finally fix what's dripping emotionally too. That distant friend, a reminder that even Peter denied him 3 times, but still got invited back to breakfast on the beach. In the early 2nd century, Roman historian Tacitus wrote about a strange sect of people who followed Christus crucified under Pontius Pilate. What baffled him most wasn't their theology, it was their resilience. They faced lions and fire and still sang. Historians still argue whether those early Christians were radicals, rebels, or something in between. But one thing's consistent: in the accounts wherever they went, value followed. They turned prisons into sanctuaries. They shared food in famines. They forgave people who literally lit them on fire. That kind of life doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from hosting the divine. You remember the first time you let someone truly stay over, like toothbrush on the sink stay over. Suddenly your mess felt personal, vulnerable. That's what it's like to host Jesus inside. You can't just close the junk drawer and hope he doesn't notice. But here's the twist: he notices and loves you anyway. Now imagine the you that walks into tomorrow. You're not richer, not more rested, and still slightly embarrassed about what you Googled at 2 a.m. But you're different. Why? Because his presence isn't passive. It's not a scented candle vibe. It's active. It elevates. Think of a tarnished coin. To most people, it's barely worth picking up. But in the right hands, it's history. In Jesus' hands, your smallest effort becomes a spark. That half-hearted prayer sacred. That clumsy attempt to be kind holy. Quick detour. Did you know some medieval monks used to pray while doing chores? Brother Lawrence, quirky guy, a little awkward in public, said he felt closer to God peeling potatoes than during formal prayer. Historians still debate whether his writings were meant for theology or therapy. Either way, he got it. Jesus shows up in the ordinary. So tonight, as you lie there with your brain trying to replay every awkward thing you've said since 2009, know this: his presence isn't waiting for you to get it together. It's already inside you, making every breath sacred, even the sighs. You feel small, great. So did Zacchaeus. He literally climbed a tree just to catch a glimpse and ended up hosting Jesus for dinner. You feel forgotten. Perfect. So did the bleeding woman who only managed to touch his robe and walked away healed. You feel angry at life. Jesus flipped tables too. He gets it. The point is, value doesn't come from fixing yourself. It comes from letting him dwell in the mess and watch him bring meaning to the madness. Remember, he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. That includes tonight. That includes you. You sit there maybe curled under a blanket that's got more emotional support duties than insulation at this point, and you think back because nostalgia is just memory wearing rose-colored LED lights. But tonight, one memory lingers louder than the rest. A story, a dinner party, and a guest list that made no sense. Jesus is reclining at a table, not with priests, not with polished people, with tax collectors, with sinners, with the types who have been blocked on every family group chat. You feel the weight of that, don't you? Because you've been the uninvited before, skipped over, left unseen. But he sat with them, and he'd sit with you too. You start to see that the people society avoids are often the ones heaven seeks out. Jesus didn't do damage control for his brand. He ate with people who would have gotten him canceled before dessert. There's something rebellious and radiant about that kind of grace. Historians still argue whether this constant mingling with the unclean was strategic evangelism or pure scandal. What's more likely, that he was playing 4D chess with sinners, or that he just loved them, period. Now fast forward to you, still sitting still wondering if the you that exists right now is enough to be wanted by someone holy. And here's the beautiful paradox. You don't have to clean up for Jesus. He never required a background check. Just a heart that says, come in. In the 5th century, St. Augustine, a party boy turned saint, with more theological depth than TikTok, has dance trends said something wild. God loves each of us as if there were only one of us. Let that sit for a second. Not collectively, not statistically. You, right now, even in your 2-day-old hoodie and unresolved childhood stuff. And he doesn't just love from a distance, he shows up. Not like your flaky friend who says, we should hang soon and disappears. Jesus actually walks into your worst days and doesn't flinch. The presence of Jesus brings value not because you're valuable by metrics, but because he sees you and chooses to stay. Let's get historical for a beat. In the early days of Christianity, meals weren't just food, they were theology on a plate. The communal act of eating with others was revolutionary. The Roman elite were baffled. Why would Jews, Gentiles, men, women, slaves, and merchants sit together as equals? It challenged the entire social hierarchy, and it still does. You've probably seen this even now in little glimpses. That quiet kid who finally smiles because someone invited him to sit at lunch. That elderly neighbor who tells you a story after you just meant to drop off soup. Presence when sincere creates belonging. And when Jesus is the presence you carry, you start doing that too. You bring value into break rooms, into waiting rooms, into the moments that seem so mundane they should come with elevator music. You start noticing things, like that coworker whose jokes always land just a little too hard because humor is armor and you know it now. Or that barista who writes your name right every time, even when the line's out the door. And in noticing you value. In valuing, you honor. And in honoring, you bring heaven closer. Did you know early Christians were called atheists by Romans? Yeah, because they didn't worship the emperor. They had no statues, just gatherings around tables, bread, wine, stories of resurrection. Historians still debate whether this absence of physical idols was defiance or design, but one thing is certain, their identity was relational, not ritual. You're part of that legacy. Every time you forgive someone who doesn't deserve it, every time you give when it hurts, every time you choose kindness when you'd rather just not you echo that same table Jesus sat at. There's a quirky tidbit that tickles me. Medieval artists, when painting the Last Supper, often included foods that didn't exist in 1st century Jerusalem, like oranges or grilled eel. It's anachronistic, sure, but it proves something. Each generation sees themselves in the story. And now it's your turn. So yes, you stumble. You mess up the script. You ghost people when you should reach out. You doom scroll past verses you bookmarked months ago. And still, he chooses to sit with you. His presence in you isn't a guest pass, it's a residence. You feel it when you apologize first. You hear it in the silence after you pray. You recognize it in the way your words shift, how your reactions soften, how your rage gets quieter even if it doesn't disappear. And that's the thing, isn't it? Presence doesn't mean perfection, it means transformation. And transformation is slow, messy, glorious. So the next time you wonder if you're doing enough, remember Jesus never asked for enough. He asked to come in, to sit, to stay. And he always brings value with him. The fridge hums. The streetlight flickers outside like it's debating retirement. And there you are, mid-bite into something vaguely healthy, scrolling past highlight reels of people who apparently only eat dragon fruit and never deal with traffic. You feel the gnawing again, not in your stomach, but deeper. That ache that whispers, "Is this all there is?" But tonight something interrupts it. A memory, or maybe more of a sacred echo. Loaves, fishes, thousands fed. And all they started with was a lunchbox meant for one. You close your eyes and suddenly you're there. Not at the front, not in the splash zone of the miracle, but somewhere in the back where the bread reaches you last. Still, you taste it. And it's enough. More than enough. When Jesus is present, scarcity turns suspiciously abundant. Historians still argue whether the feeding of the 5,000 was literal or symbolic, some suggesting that Jesus' compassion moved people to share hidden food. But either way, the real miracle might just be this. In his presence, the selfish become generous and the impossible becomes lunch. Think about it. That boy didn't bring a buffet. He brought what he had. A couple of loaves, a few fish. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't even Instagram worthy. But when handed to Jesus, it multiplied. So do your small acts. So do your weary prayers. So does your awkward kindness. Jesus has this annoying habit of using what we call not enough to accomplish more than we planned. And you've seen this, haven't you? When your last $5 bought a coffee for someone who hadn't smiled all week. When your rushed, clumsy text turned out to be the exact words someone needed to read. When your moment of, "I've got nothing left," somehow poured life into someone else. Quirky historical note during a famine in 6th century Byzantium. Local monks fed entire villages with what they described as mystery portions that never ran out. Some thought it was exaggerated folklore. Others, especially the ones fed, weren't asking questions. You may not be running a soup kitchen in sandals, but your life still serves. That look you gave today, the one where your eyes said, "I see you," that may have been someone's miracle. Because when Jesus lives in you, so does his economy. And in his economy, generosity never bankrupts. The scarcity mindset is a lie dressed as wisdom. It tells you to hoard energy, affection, forgiveness. Don't give too much, it says. They'll drain you. But Jesus doesn't operate that way. He gives, and then gives again. And when you carry him, so do you. Now, before you freak out, no, this doesn't mean burning yourself out to prove you're holy. Remember, even Jesus napped in storms. But it does mean believing that the little you offer, given with love, becomes sacred, multiplied. Picture your next moment of giving, not as subtraction, but as seeding. And not every seed grows where you can see it. That's the thing about divine math. It doesn't show its work. You don't need a mega platform to make impact. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need presence, his presence, and a willingness to hand over your lunch. There's a mid-century painting in a dusty Italian church. You'd miss it if you didn't look twice. It's not framed well, not lit dramatically. But in it, a boy offers bread and Jesus meets his eyes. It's not the bread that draws attention. It's the gaze, the transfer of trust. The silent understanding, this isn't much, but it's everything I have. That's you. That's your 2 a.m. faith. Your half-formed prayers. Your silent, unseen acts of goodness that feel like whispers in a hurricane. In Jesus' hands they thunder. And the leftovers, 12 baskets. More than what they started with. That's important. Jesus didn't just barely make it. He over-delivered. He always does. So maybe tonight, as your brain replays the list of things you didn't get done, you could pause, just for a second, and imagine what he might be doing with the parts you did manage to give. You may not see baskets yet, but they're filling, even now as you rest, even now as you sigh and wonder if anyone sees your effort. Even now, as you wonder if this little flicker of faith is enough to light anything at all, it is, because He's in it. And wherever He is, things multiply. So eat your metaphorical bread, share it, even if it's just crumbs, and trust that somehow, some way, someone's going to call it a miracle. You're standing in the kitchen. Maybe it's late. The only sound is the clink of a spoon against ceramic as you stir something you're not even hungry for. Your thoughts are heavier than the silence, and joy feels like a rumor. Maybe it used to visit, but lately it forgot your address. And then without warning, your mind drifts back to a wedding in Cana, ancient stone jars, confused servants, and a miracle that didn't save a life, didn't heal a disease, didn't cast out a demon. It saved a party. Wine had run out. Embarrassment loomed. People were side-eyeing the hosts. You know that feeling when something's about to go wrong and you just brace. But Jesus was there, and He turned ordinary, tasteless, utterly foreign water into wine. Not just decent wine, the best. Because His presence doesn't just rescue, it restores, it beautifies. It brings joy back to the table where laughter had started to fade. Historians still argue whether the water-to-wine miracle was symbolic of a new covenant or simply a flex. But either way, what He did then, He still does now. He takes the flat and makes it full, the dull and makes it divine. And yes, you've seen it. Not with stone jars, but with the way a painful moment turned into a joke you now share with friends, the way grief softened into gratitude, the way your heart dry as desert soil suddenly bloomed at the sound of a child's laughter or a line in a worship song. He brings joy, not the glittery kind that fades with the confetti, but the kind that anchors you. Here's a quirky tidbit some medieval churches used to put little bells inside communion wine vessels, not for decoration, for joy. When the cup moved, the bells sang. It was a reminder Jesus turned water into wine, and your sorrow won't last forever. So here's the part you might not like. Joy doesn't always arrive the way you expect. Sometimes it crashes the scene dressed like disappointment. Sometimes it's born from surrender. Sometimes, like the servants at Cana, all you do is follow a strange instruction, fill the jars, and suddenly you're standing in a miracle. You're not chasing joy, it's chasing you, or rather He is. You walk into another week thinking nothing special is going to happen, and maybe it won't. But then again, Jesus is in you, and He doesn't do ordinary. So the meeting you dread might become a moment of peace. The errand you resent might lead to a conversation that heals something. The broken plan might be the only way joy could sneak in unnoticed. And joy, it doesn't shout. It doesn't perform. Sometimes it's just knowing you're not alone, that He's near, that your worth isn't tied to performance, that you are loved in your slipper-wearing, sleep-deprived, cereal-for-dinner kind of way. There's a reason wine shows up again in Scripture at the Last Supper, at the cross, even in the imagery of heaven. It's a thread of celebration that runs through sorrow. It says, this isn't the end. Joy is coming. Now picture this you tomorrow, coffee in hand, still tired? Still wondering if that prayer you whispered will ever echo back with an answer. And then something happens. Maybe small, maybe sacred, a moment of clarity, a warm hug, a kind word from someone unexpected, a thought that feels like light in the fog. That's the wine. That's what He's been turning your water into all along. Because you didn't just invite Him once you're carrying Him now. And wherever He goes, celebration follows, even in pain, especially in pain. So stir your tea, or coffee, or whatever your midnight ritual is. Let the stillness be sacred, because joy doesn't always arrive like fireworks. Sometimes it walks in quietly holding a cup, offering a toast to the part of you that didn't give up. And maybe tonight you don't need fireworks. Maybe all you need is that whisper inside. He's still here, and He's still turning water into wine. You lie in bed now, lights off the world, hushed like it's tiptoeing past your door. But in your mind, there's a storm. Not a gentle drizzle of doubts. No, it's the full-blown, boat-rocking, thunder-cracking kind. The kind where you try to pray, but it feels like talking into a fan. You close your eyes, and suddenly you're on a lake. Not metaphorically, you're there. Ancient wood beneath your feet, wine slapping your face, and the boat lurching like it has a grudge against you. The others are shouting. Waves are high. You're not sure if you're seasick or soul sick. And then Jesus, asleep. Yep. While you're out here stress sweating your dignity away, he's napping. You want to yell really right now. But then he gets up, doesn't panic, doesn't shout orders, just says, "Peace, be still." And suddenly the wind forgets how to howl. The sea tucks itself in. The chaos obeys. You've felt it before, haven't you? Maybe not with water and wind, but in your chest when the noise was too loud, the future too foggy, and the silence after a whispered, "Help me," felt heavier than the prayer itself. But then peace, unexplainable, immediate, sacred. Historians still argue whether the Sea of Galilee was prone to freak storms or if this particular event was more of a narrative tool. But sailors back then didn't romanticize water. It was chaos, deep, unknowable. And Jesus didn't just walk on it, he spoke to it like a petulant child, and it obeyed. That same voice whispers in you, not with fanfare, not with lightning bolts, just a presence that calms before it corrects. And sometimes, honestly, he doesn't calm the storm first. He calms you. Here's a quirky fact. Early Christian monks used to build their prayer cells to face the east, not because of aesthetics, but because the rising sun reminded them that light always wins, every time, that even the longest night has an expiration date, and your storm, it won't last forever. But let's be honest, you don't always feel peace right away. Sometimes you mistake his silence for absence. But sleeping in the storm isn't the same as abandoning the boat. His calm isn't carelessness, it's confidence. He knows how this ends, and he knows you. You want him to fix the forecast. He wants to fix your faith. There's this moment in the chaos right before he speaks where everyone's watching him, expecting panic, a plan, anything, and he just is, present, unmoved. You begin to realize maybe peace isn't a change in circumstances. Maybe it's the presence of someone who isn't afraid. So next time you feel overwhelmed, remember the boat, remember the storm, remember that even the disciples who saw him heal and feed and forgive still panicked when the water got loud. You're in good company. And still, he calmed it. That presence inside you. It's not passive, it's powerful. It's the same voice, the voice that told the ocean to sit down, and it did. The same voice that now tells your anxious thoughts, you don't run the show anymore. But storms don't disappear because you figured something out. They end when Jesus says they're done. And until then, his peace is not a personality trait, it's a promise. So take a breath, not a shallow one. A deep anchor your soul kind of breath. Feel the presence in your chest, the divine inside the everyday. Jesus doesn't need perfect conditions to bring peace. He brings it because he's peace. And maybe, just maybe that's why he's in your boat. Not to spare you from storms, but to remind the storm who's in charge. It's a weird thought, isn't it? That the hands capable of healing blindness and raising the dead would willingly touch a leper. And not with gloves, not from a distance, not with a prayer shouted across a crowd, but with a touch. You know what that means, right? It means Jesus doesn't flinch from the parts of you that others avoid. You sit there tonight scrolling through memories, past wounds you try not to reopen. Not the big cinematic traumas, the quiet ones. The rejections that were too subtle to explain the grief no one acknowledged, the invisible battles no one ever saw. That's the kind of pain you've tucked away, labeled too much or maybe I'm just dramatic. But Jesus doesn't sidestep that. He walks straight toward it. He sees the metaphorical leprosy of your heart, the shame, the secrets, the parts of you that feel untouchable. And he reaches out anyway. Historians still debate the exact nature of first-century leprosy, whether it was true Hansen's disease or a broader category of skin conditions. But that's missing the point. The point is, lepers weren't just sick. They were exiled, banished from community, shunned. Touching one wasn't just medically risky, it was socially suicidal. But Jesus touched them anyway. You feel that, don't you? The weight of what that means, that He's not afraid of your emotional mess, your spiritual fatigue, your anxiety that sometimes shows up wearing productivity as a mask. Here's a quirky historical tidbit. Some early Christian communities assigned a soul companion to those struggling with despair or doubt. Not a fixer, not a teacher, just someone to be with them, to sit in silence, to say, "You're not alone." That's what Jesus does. That's what He is. His presence in you means your pain is no longer wasted space. It becomes sacred ground. And here's the twist. The healing didn't start when the leper's skin cleared. It started the moment Jesus touched him, before the healing, before the proof. Because love goes first. You've done this too, even if you didn't know it. When you texted someone who hadn't been themselves. When you invited the quiet coworker to lunch. When you forgave before the apology came. You were carrying His presence. You were touching the untouchable. And maybe tonight, the one who needs that touch is you. You've convinced yourself that you need to fix it first, clean it up, make it presentable. But Jesus never asked for a polished soul. He asked for a willing one. Let's talk real life. The way you sometimes isolate, not because you're tired of people, but because you're scared they'll see the real you. The one who still grieves, still questions, still can't forgive yourself for that one thing. He sees that version of you, and He stays. No awkward glances, no spiritual side-eye, just the warmth of divine presence settling into your brokenness like it's not afraid of the dark. Remember this, healing isn't always instant. It's often slow, layered, annoyingly nonlinear, but it begins the moment you stop hiding, the moment you let Him touch the wound you've been pretending isn't there. And when you do, you begin to touch others differently too. You'll start noticing the lepers of today, the emotionally distant, the chronically anxious, the painfully awkward, and you won't fix them. You'll sit beside them, like He does with you. There's power in presence, not performance, not preaching, just presence. So here's your prayer tonight, not for escape, not even for answers, but for the courage to let Him in, all the way in, past the curated self, past the filtered narrative. Because you are not a project, you are a person. And Jesus didn't come to renovate you. He came to reside in you. So let Him touch the part of you that still recoils, the ache, the scar, the silent scream. And when He does, you'll remember you were never untouchable, just waiting to be held by the only hands that never let go. You're scrolling again past ads for things you don't need and posts from people who seem suspiciously happy at all times. Somewhere between the fitness reels and food pics, your mind whispers a craving. But it's not for abs or avocado toast. It's for something deeper. You're hungry, but not the kind of hungry a snack can fix. You want to be filled. And that's when it hits you. He said, "I am the bread of life. Not I give bread, not I bake bread. I am the bread." Which means the satisfaction isn't something He hands you. It's something He is. You don't just need advice, affirmation, or another productivity app. You need presence, daily. Not just for the soul, but for the stomach of your soul, the part that growls when meaning feels scarce. Historians still argue whether Jesus' bread of life statement in John 6 was meant literally, metaphorically, or sacramentally. But the crowd that day, they weren't debating theology. They just wanted more food. They were chasing the miracle, not the miracle worker. You've done it too, so have I. We chase outcomes, not intimacy. We pray for answers, not alignment. We want what He gives, not always who He is. But here's the sacred pivot. His presence doesn't fill you the way fast food does. It fills you the way home does. The way comfort blankets and candlelight and a quiet "you're safe now" do. It satisfies on a level even your best days can't reach. There's a quirky tidbit from 17th century France. Some monasteries baked bread with crosses stamped on top, not just for flair, but so that even the poorest who came begging could take home something holy. Bread, yes, but also blessing. When Jesus lives in you, you become that kind of bread. People feel better after being with you. Not because you're charming or clever, but because you're full of something, someone, full of him. It's wild, isn't it? That you can go from I'm not enough to I've got something to offer just by abiding. By remembering that Jesus didn't just die for you, he lives in you, and he feeds through you. But feeding isn't always glorious. Sometimes it's listening when you're exhausted. Sometimes it's making coffee for a friend and offering silence instead of advice. Sometimes it's letting someone ugly cry on your new shirt without wincing. You give what you carry, and you're carrying the bread of life. So tomorrow when someone frustrates you, or forgets you, or flat out fails you, remember you've been fed. And fed people feed people. You don't have to hoard joy. You don't have to ration kindness. He's not running out. The trick is staying close, staying hungry for him, not just his blessings. Because here's the weird paradox. The more you eat of him, the hungrier you become. But not in a desperate, empty way. In a joyful, I can't get enough of this grace kind of way. Think of it like this spiritual hunger isn't a sign you're empty. It's a sign you're alive. And maybe, just maybe, you've already tasted more than you realize. Like that moment today when you didn't snap. That thought that nudged you to speak gently. That breath you took instead of spiraling. Little crumbs of glory scattered through your day. And when you look back, really look, you realize he's been feeding you all along. So, tonight, don't shame your cravings. Don't scold your soul for feeling dry. Instead, bring your hunger to the table. Sit down with the one who doesn't just satisfy. He stays. And as you rest, know this, you are not empty. You're already full of the only bread that never grows stale. It's quiet. You're laying there, lights off, scrolling's done, but the mind isn't. You feel small. Not unimportant, just missed. Like someone misplaced your name in the credits of life. You're trying to be fine, but tonight you wonder, do I even matter in the grand scheme? Then you remember the story. It's barely 3 sentences long, hidden like a footnote in Jesus' teachings. A woman loses a coin, just one. She turns the house upside down to find it, sweeps every corner, lights a lamp, and when she finds it, she throws a party. Historians still argue whether that parable was purely about repentance or about how God assigns value. But one thing's clear, the coin never stopped being valuable, even when lost, even in the dark, even when forgotten by everyone except the one who owned it. And guess what? You're the coin. You felt it before being overlooked, not chosen for the thing, not replied to, not invited. You tell yourself it's no big deal, that you're used to it, but that quiet ache, that's your soul whispering, I was made to be known. Here's a quirky fact. Ancient Roman coins often had tiny imperfections, misstruck or off-center, but they still circulated. They still counted. And the ones with flaws, they're rare now, more valuable. Your imperfections don't disqualify you. They distinguish you. And here's the sacred twist. Jesus doesn't just find you. He searches. He doesn't glance around the room and say, close enough. He gets down in the dust, lights the lamp, moves heaven and earth to locate you. The party isn't thrown when you fix yourself. It starts the moment you're found. Maybe you've been measuring your worth by metrics likes, invites, bank balance, waist size, but Jesus measures worth by presence. You're here, still breathing, still reaching, then you matter, because his presence in you doesn't just give you comfort, it gives you value. You've started doing it too, without realizing, noticing people others miss, asking the cashier how their shift's going, texting a friend just because, sitting next to the kid no one sits with. That's him in you. When you carry Jesus, you start seeing coins everywhere. People hidden in the couch cushions of life, waiting for someone to care enough to search. Sometimes you're that coin. Sometimes you're the one with the lamp. Both are sacred roles. And tonight, as you lie still wondering if your quiet existence matters in this loud, clout-hungry world, hear this. Heaven never once shrugged at your silence, never once looked past you. You were always seen, always sought, always celebrated. You bring value into every room just by being in it. Not because you perform, not because you're impressive, but because you carry the one who gives everything meaning. So tomorrow, when you show up, whether to a boardroom or a classroom or a grocery store aisle, remember you're already found, already favored, already celebrated. And every time you dare to believe that, the party starts again. You feel it creeping in sometimes, don't you? That sense that something inside has gone quiet. Dreams that once throbbed like drumbeats now lie flat like forgotten notes in an old song. You start asking yourself, is this just how it is now? But then there's this memory, know a truth. A man 4 days dead, wrapped in linen, buried with grief and finality. And Jesus stood outside his tomb and didn't knock. He called, "Lazarus, come out." You wonder what would have happened if he hadn't said the name. Would the whole graveyard have risen? Historians still argue whether the resurrection of Lazarus was metaphorical, literal, or a preview of Jesus' own. But again, that's not the heartbeat here. The miracle wasn't just about Lazarus breathing again. It was about showing us that dead things don't stay dead when Jesus is present. And tonight, maybe you need that reminder. You're carrying things that feel long gone. A friendship that faded like static. A purpose you used to wake up early for. A version of yourself you liked better. But here's the truth. If Jesus lives in you, then resurrection lives in you too. It doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's a whisper. Try again. Sometimes it's a tug, text them. Sometimes it's just enough strength to hope in the morning what you buried the night before. Here's a quirky one for you. Did you know in ancient catacombs, early Christians painted peacocks on tombs? Why? Because peacocks were believed never to decay after death. A symbol of resurrection, of life that couldn't rot. A low-budget theology mural to say, death doesn't win. And that includes the small deaths too. The death of joy, the death of trust, the death of what could have been. But Jesus doesn't just resuscitate people. He restores stories. You're not too far gone, and neither is your purpose. If he can raise a man from 4 days in darkness, he can raise your spark from 4 years of doubt. You just have to be willing to hear the call. Come out of shame, out of fear, out of resignation. It's not always graceful. Lazarus probably stumbled, squinting into the light, wrapped up like a spiritual burrito. But stumbling still counts. Squinting still counts. Coming out still counts. You've had moments like that. Maybe you didn't name them. But you've been there when you laughed again after months of apathy. When you risked a yes after a string of closed doors. When you let someone love you, even when you were bracing for disappointment. That's resurrection. That's Jesus in you refusing to let dead things stay buried. And here's the part that changes everything. The people around you. They've got tombs too. You know what you bring? The voice that echoes his. The courage to stand outside someone else's pain and whisper, "Come out." You don't have to fix people. Just call to the light in them. The part that remembers. The part that hopes. The part that still hears his voice even after all this time. So tonight, let yourself feel it. That sacred pulse returning. That buried peace beginning to stir. That quiet not yet rising from the ashes of your never again. You are not done. And what was once dead in you, it's already breathing. Tease late, there's a weight on your chest that isn't physical. Just that familiar ache you don't really talk about, the one that wraps around your ribs like a whisper that says, you should be stronger than this. You scroll or clean or distract, anything but sit with it. But then a memory drifts in, Jesus standing outside a tomb again, not to raise the dead this time, just to weep. Lazarus was already dead. Martha was blaming. Mary was grieving. The crowd was muttering. And Jesus cried. He knew resurrection was coming. He is resurrection. And still he wept. Historians still debate the nature of those tears. Were they for Lazarus? For the unbelief in the crowd, for death itself? But honestly, the reason doesn't dilute the comfort. What matters is that God cried. And you're allowed to too. Tears aren't weakness. They're sacred honesty. And when you carry Jesus within, it doesn't erase pain, it dignifies it. It doesn't cancel sorrow, it accompanies it. You've probably done it before. That thing where someone asks how you are and you say, "Fine so fast it could be Morse code for, I'm not." You think holding it in is noble. That being strong means being stoic. But Jesus, the strongest one in the room, broke down in public. Let that free you. Here's a quirky historical tidbit. In ancient Jewish tradition, professional mourners would cry loudly at funerals, sometimes even wailing. Why? Because it was believed that public grief helped private hearts heal. Mourning was a community affair. You don't have to do this alone. His presence in you doesn't make you bulletproof. It makes you brave enough to bleed in the open. And more than that, it helps you sit with others who are bleeding too. You know the power of just being there, not preaching, not quoting Romans 8, just being. A friend who stays when the tears fall. A listener who doesn't flinch at the ugly cries. That's Jesus' work. You're carrying his compassion now. The kind that sees pain, feels it, and chooses to stay anyway. And here's the beautiful backwards truth. Your tears are part of your healing. They water the places where joy will grow again. Because Jesus didn't just cry, he followed his tears with resurrection. So go ahead, let it out. Not because you've given up, but because you believe something better is coming. Let your heart be tender. You're not broken, you're becoming. And in the silence, after the crying fades, he's still there. He doesn't rush you. He doesn't roll his eyes. He sits, he stays, he weeps with you. So tonight, if the weight is too much, let your soul exhale. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to grieve what you lost, what you hoped for, what still hurts. And while the world might misunderstand your tears, Jesus never does. He cried too. And because of that, your tears are never wasted. You're flipping your pillow to the cool side, hoping it helps you forget the thing you said or didn't say. That moment from earlier today that clings like static. You keep replaying it, don't you? That sharp tone, that silence you wish you'd filled, that opportunity you think you missed. It's too late, you think. And that's when a scene surfaces a hill. 3 crosses, and on the middle, one Jesus bleeding, gasping, still loving. But tonight we look at the man next to him, a thief. He wasn't a misunderstood poet. He wasn't there for petty theft. He was dying for a life he wrecked. And all he had left was a breath and a desperate sentence, "Jesus, remember me." And Jesus answered with the most absurd, illogical, glorious promise ever. "Today you'll be with me in paradise." Historians still argue whether the thief was a revolutionary or a robber, whether he had heard of Jesus before that day or was just clinging to his last hope. But what no one argues is this: his entire eternity shifted in a moment. Which means it's never too late. Not for you. Not for the people you've written off. Not for the version of yourself you thought you'd never get back. You carry Jesus now, and he is the embodiment of last-minute grace. You don't have to earn it. The thief had no resume, no apology tour, no Instagram-worthy testimony. Just honesty. Just humility. Just a request. You've probably had moments like that, maybe not on a cross, but in a car at 1 a.m., in a bathroom stall, or alone with your guilt. That whisper, "Please remember me," and he does, every time. Here's a quirky bit of history in the catacombs of Rome. One of the earliest Christian symbols found etched beside the cross wasn't a crown or dove. It was an anchor. Why? Because it meant stability, security, hope that holds even in death. That's what grace is, an anchor that finds you in freefall. And when you carry that grace, you start offering it too. You become the person who gives second chances, who believes one moment can change everything. You stop tallying failures like they define a person. You begin to see souls, not scorecards. That coworker who keeps messing up grace. That sibling who hasn't called in months, grace. Your own reflection in the mirror, grace. You stop waiting for people to earn kindness. You give it because you were given it first. And that thief on the cross, he's not a side note. He's the proof that no one is too far. That even with your last breath, you can speak the name of Jesus and be welcomed home. So tonight, if regret is gnawing at you, let it go. Confess it, say the words. Not because he needs them, but because you do. And when you do, don't be surprised if the voice that answers doesn't scold. It welcomes. It says, "You're still mine. Paradise still waits, and you are still worthy of coming home." That's not a loophole. That's love. That's Jesus. And that's what lives in you now. You stir before dawn, maybe not fully awake, just caught between sleep and the thoughts that arrive too early. There's a weight in your chest that doesn't come from dreams. It comes from memory, mistakes, maybe even a strange kind of shame that you can't quite name. And then it surfaces again. Not the memory this time, but the moment. A tomb, a rolled away stone, and the emptiness that wasn't emptiness at all, but evidence. He wasn't there, because he wasn't dead. And neither are you. Historians still argue whether the resurrection was a historical event, a metaphor for renewal, or an ancient community's desperate hope wrapped in story. But here's the thing, they're still arguing because the tomb was empty. That fact alone shook empires, and it still shakes you if you let it. Because the resurrection isn't just about what happened to Jesus, it's about what happens to everything when he's present. Death isn't the end anymore. Shame doesn't get the final word. Failure doesn't get to narrate your future. You've experienced many resurrections yourself, haven't you? That friendship you thought was done, but healed. That part of your heart that went numb, but now laughs again. That purpose you thought you'd lost, but somehow keeps resurfacing. And here's the sacred twist. The empty tomb isn't a symbol of absence. It's a sign of possibility, of second chances, of fresh mercy. You've probably heard someone say, "Every day is a new beginning," and rolled your eyes. But this is deeper. This is waking up with Jesus in you, not just beside you. It's resurrection power in your bloodstream. It's knowing that no matter what yesterday buried, hope is always one breath away from revival. Here's a quirky one. In 4th century Jerusalem, pilgrims visited the empty tomb and took dust from the floor as a relic. Dust, because even the absence of Jesus was seen as holy. The nothingness meant everything. And the same is true for you. Whatever you've lost, whatever has died inside Jesus, doesn't just mourn it. He transforms it. You don't have to pretend nothing happened. Resurrection doesn't erase the cross. It honors it and then surpasses it. You carry the scars, but they don't carry you. That's what his presence does. It doesn't make your story cleaner. It makes it truer, richer, redemptive. The pain isn't wasted. The wounds aren't empty. They're proof of passage. Proof that you were buried, but didn't stay buried. There's power in that. Quiet power. The kind that lets you get up after crying yourself to sleep. The kind that helps you forgive when your heart's still sore. The kind that lets you walk out of a metaphorical grave and keep walking. You bring resurrection with you. When you speak life into someone who's given up, that's Jesus in you, moving stones. When you believe in someone who's fallen short for the 15th time, that's resurrection at work. When you rise again, even when you'd rather hide, that's the empty tomb whispering, "You are not done." So tomorrow when your alarm goes off and the day tries to label you with old names, failure, fraud, forgettable, remember, none of those names made it out of the tomb. Only you did. You're a resurrection story still unfolding. You're walking somewhere, maybe literally, maybe just pacing your own thoughts, and it feels like you're going in circles. You've prayed, you've waited, you've even lit a candle or two. Still nothing. Just silence. And that's when you remember two travelers. Heads down, hearts heavy, walking a dusty road from Jerusalem to Emmaus. They'd heard the rumors of resurrection, but it hadn't made it real for them yet. Hope hadn't reached their feet. They didn't recognize him when he joined them. Historians still argue whether the road to Emmaus was symbolic or a literal village. What matters more is the moment Jesus walked with them in their confusion. He didn't interrupt their doubt. He entered it. That's how he moves with presence, not pressure. And you've had Emmaus moments. Those hours or days or even years when God felt like a stranger. You asked for signs and got silence. You stared at closed doors and begged them to budge. You figured maybe you missed your turn somewhere back in 2019. But Jesus was walking with you the whole time. You didn't see him. That's okay. They didn't either. It wasn't until later, until the breaking of the bread, until the blessing, that their eyes were opened. And suddenly the journey made sense. Here's a quirky little detail. Some early church traditions claimed that the bread Jesus broke on the Emmaus Road wasn't ordinary. It was honeyed, sweetened, because even then, believers believed that when Jesus shows up, bitterness breaks. And your detour, it's not wasted. It's where your heart learns to recognize him again, not in the miraculous, but in the mundane. In breaking bread, in sharing space, in walking slowly with someone who doesn't rush your healing. You've done it without realizing, walked beside someone who was unraveling, not with advice, but with presence. You were their Emmaus. The road didn't change, but neither of you walked it alone. Jesus in you does that. He walks with the doubters, the confused, the ones who don't know how to believe anymore but still keep moving. And eventually, somewhere between now and the next breath, their hearts begin to burn again. Maybe yours too. You see, the presence of Jesus doesn't always show up with fireworks. Sometimes it's just warmth. A slow burning fire behind the ribs, a flicker of, could it be? That doesn't fully catch until later. But it always does. So keep walking. Even when you feel like you're getting nowhere, keep looking for him, not just in the breakthrough, but in the breaking, the small acts, the slow blessings. Because Jesus is still in the business of showing up unannounced, of turning detours into destinations, of reminding you that sacred things often happen while you're just walking. And one day, maybe not today, but soon, you'll look back on this stretch of the road and realize he was there. He always was. You're sitting with it now, the doubt. Not the loud, rebellious kind that shakes fists at the sky. No, this one's quieter, softer, more tired than angry. You've prayed, you've served, you've sung the songs, and still, sometimes you wonder if you really believe. And you're not proud of that. But you're also not alone, because there's Thomas. We've called him Doubting Thomas, like it's his first and last name. But really, he's just honest. The guy didn't fake it, didn't nod along. He said what you've thought 100 times. Unless I see, I won't believe. And what did Jesus do? He showed up, not to scold, not to shame, but to offer, here touch, see, come closer. He met Thomas in the exact place of his doubt. Historians still argue whether Thomas made it all the way to India as a missionary or died earlier in Jerusalem. But wherever he went transformed, not because his questions got erased, but because Jesus entered them. You feel that, don't you? Jesus doesn't require blind faith. He isn't insecure about your questions. He's not scared of the moments when you whisper, "Is this all real?" In fact, he expects those moments. Faith isn't the absence of doubt. It's choosing to stay in the room with your doubt and still say, "I want you." Here's a quirky tidbit. In some ancient Eastern churches, Thomas isn't portrayed with hesitation, but with courage, the one who asked the question out loud. Because asking meant he still cared, still hoped, still wanted to believe. You do too. And his presence in you, it makes room for that. It doesn't flatten your questions, it holds them. It wraps them in patience and whispers, "Keep looking. I'm still here." Because faith isn't a straight line. It's a winding road with missed turns, strange pauses, and unexpected clarity. And sometimes your most sacred moments come right after your hardest questions. You've seen it, haven't you? That feeling after a hard cry, when the world doesn't look fixed, but it feels lighter. That strange peace. After you say, "God, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm staying anyway." That's faith. That's presence. That's Jesus in you, gently shifting the atmosphere even when you're too exhausted to notice. You're not a bad believer because you doubt. You're an honest one. And honest hearts are the ones Jesus loves to reveal himself to. So tonight, if the questions are louder than the answers, don't panic. Don't shut down. Just stay open. Breathe. Whisper his name. You don't need polished prayers, just presence. Because Jesus didn't reject Thomas, and he won't reject you either. He's still saying it now. Come closer. Touch. See. I'm right here. You breathe in, slowly deeper this time. Something's shifted. Not because your life just magically improved or your problems vanished with the snap of a divine finger. No. It's subtler than that. Truer. Like something solid settling into place inside you. Because now you know He's in you. And that changes everything. You start to feel it in your posture, in the way your heart quiets when you say His name even under your breath. Jesus. Not just a historical figure or a Sunday school answer, but someone real present, moving through your limbs and thoughts and choices. You don't carry Him like a passenger. You carry Him like breath. And where you go, He goes. Where you speak, He speaks. Where you hurt, He heals from the inside out. That presence isn't just about comfort anymore. It's about calling. You wake up and remember this day matters. You matter. Not because you earned it, because He's in you. Historians still argue over how the early Christians changed the Roman Empire without weapons armies or wealth. But the truth is simple. They carried Jesus, and people felt it in their kindness, in their courage, in their refusal to return hate with hate. You do the same now, whether you know it or not. When you smile at the person no one sees, when you forgive even though it still hurts, when you choose joy again and again, like it's oxygen, not a luxury, that's not just goodness. That's divinity at work. Here's a final quirky tidbit. Some early believers believed that when Jesus ascended to heaven, He left behind more than His spirit. They believed He left behind traces of Himself in every believer, little echoes of heaven in every human heart. And now that echo lives in you. You might not see it in the mirror. You might not feel it when the kids are screaming, or the job's draining, or the world seems on fire. But it's there. And it gives weight to your presence. When you walk into a room, light walks in with you. Not because you're trying to be impressive, but because He's real, and He lives in you. You might not preach a sermon, but you'll be one. You might never write a book, but you'll live a story worth reading. You might not always feel holy, but He's not asking for your performance, just your presence. So be light, be salt, be the quiet miracle in someone's ordinary day, because His presence in you always brings value to your moments, your mistakes, your mission. Even when you're unsure, even when you're just surviving, you shine. And now as this night winds down, you realize something you maybe knew all along. Deep down in the places no one sees, you are not alone. You never were. Not in the chaos, not in the silence, not even now as you drift toward sleep. He is with you. He is in you. And because of that, your life matters more than you ever dared to believe. So now the night leans in a little closer. The air gets softer. The hum of the world fades just enough for you to hear your own breath again. And in that rhythm, in that gentle in and out, you feel Him steady, unshaken right there. There's nothing left to prove tonight. Nothing more to do. You've heard the truth, and now you get to rest in it. Let His presence wrap around you like a warm blanket over tired shoulders. Let it settle into your bones, into your chest, into every part of you that's still learning how to be gentle with yourself. You are not too late. You are not too much. You are not forgotten. The God who raised the dead, who calmed the sea, who wept and healed and fed thousands, now lives in you. So breathe a little slower now. Let your mind drift not to fear or lists or regrets, but to still waters, to quiet paths, to the whisper that says you're loved, you're known, you're mine. And when morning comes and the light touches your face, you'll rise with it, not just because you're awake, but because you carry something eternal. Sleep well, miracle bearer. You've got light inside you now.